gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Exceptional Conservative Show live from the nation's capital. It is a joy talking with Tommy Speciale the second. He is running for the U.S. Senate in the Commonwealth of Virginia to take out Mark Warner. He is not an establishment, and you know I'm not presenting establishment people for elections. He is a down-to-earth, conservative, grassroots Reagan Republican, just what's needed here in Washington, D.C. You are watching this at the moment. We're recording this on our YouTube channel for future reference so that you'll be able to send it out wherever you wish to as many friends as you wish. We need to make certain that we have our representation in place. Mr. Speciale, we were talking about values earlier, and while most of our attentions in America have been placed on George Floyd and his untimely death in Minneapolis, many individuals have been blinded by the fact that there is a war going on that will take advantage of any situation they can to advance an agenda. And you find it with Black Lives Matter, you find it with Antifa, but those are individuals who are out for the very soul of America to transition us from the liberty and freedom that we once knew to a more communistic, totalitarian regime. And if I'm off limits or off record here in terms of that, just please correct me or at least give me your thought. But I want to get your thoughts regarding the rioting that took place last week. And is this what's best for America?
Wow. That's why I redid the Reagan speech. Actually, I had been planning on redoing the Ronald Reagan speech from 1964, where he literally identifies the threats arrayed against us in 1964, which were the threats of the liberal agenda to dismantle our American values. That was the goal of the liberal progressive movement. And one of the things in sort of redoing the speech that he used in his speech the word the masses, because at the time in 1964 the Democrats used the word the masses for the people. Now that that would be a big indicator of like communists and socialists, right? So they changed it to being the working man, which is really the same thing as the masses. They just found a different way to say it, but they do all the same thing. The horrific, and I do believe it was a murder. However, it gets panned out as to whether or not it was, involuntary manslaughter. I don't really care. Yeah. The man was handcuffed. He was essentially suffocating, and and no one intervened. And I have a lot of law enforcement in my family. Yeah. And both my personal family as well as my extended family through my in-laws. And almost all of them will admit that the police use excessive force at times. But there's a cutoff of when the person is no longer a threat or a danger, where all physical threat against that person and all injury against that person should stop immediately. Yeah. In the military, if I did that to a member of the Taliban or a member of the ISIS, I would go to prison for that. Mm-hmm. And other soldiers, if they saw me doing that, would stop me from doing that. The problem is accountability within law enforcement. And I'm not blaming all law enforcement. Don't misunderstand. Yeah. What I'm saying is that and I don't believe that it is just racism. I think that it is an institutional problem in the police mechanism, in the police bureaucracy, where laws, rules, practices, and policies have been held over for too long of a period of time without being scrutinized. Yes. Ultimately. And they are ripe for abuse. And then, of course, the biggest thing, and this is, finally the Democrats are starting to wake up and realize that policemen's unions are bad, okay? They're big fans of unions until they suddenly realize that the policeman union is protecting people who've been brutalizing minorities for decades. And I have been personally brutalized by law enforcement. I have been falsely arrested. I've had cops lie about me on the stand. So while I cannot share the racial bias component of this.
Mm-hmm.
I have believed for a long time that this is way beyond race. This is about law enforcement and its relationship with the community.
Exactly.
Um, and the truth is, there's a lot of mental health problems within law enforcement because they can't admit, because they could lose their job if they have a very high rate of suicide, a very high rate of divorce, because they deal with bad people all day.
Yeah.
And they deal with drug addicts and people beating their wives and wives beating their husbands. They deal with a lot of bad stuff on a regular basis, so they become very jaded, I think.
Yeah.
And then that jaded person, as an individual, they have bad days too, but they don't have a way to get help, because if they go get help, then they can lose their badge, they can lose their job, they aren't viewed as being reliable. There's all these institutional things that prevent them from getting help when they need it. So
Yep.
I believe that there needs to be a self-policing process. There needs to be something changed within law enforcement and I spoke recently at a Black Lives Matter protest of the candidates here in Virginia. As far as I know, I'm the only one that actually went to one.
Yeah.
And, I no one should be made to feel the way that the black community is made to feel on a day-to-day basis. No one should. I know I don't believe I have ever made anybody feel that way.
Yeah.
But people do feel that way. And we've got to educate our kids, and we've got to, one of the women at the protest said, white people need to get uncomfortable and have these uncomfortable conversations about racism. And I agree with her. I think we're afraid to discuss racism because we don't know anything about it, because we've never been able to discuss it.
I agree with you in terms of the discussion regarding racism, but unfortunately, racism in its discussions of today are clouded by the jading of the liberal motif. We're not looking
Yes.
for
Yes.
a solution on race. We're looking to overthrow
That's
the
correct.
Constitution. We're looking to institute, like, I'll be very honest with you. If I were a police officer today, I would probably want to resign by the end of the year, because literally, I mean, you're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't. It doesn't matter what you say or what you do, you're always going to be demonized. And that's not a place where we want policing to be, in my opinion. And the other part of this is that there were 4 people of different races who were on his back and neck. It was a white, there was an Asian, there was a Hispanic, and there was a black man. So, quite frankly, the racial diversity was quite imminent in that particular scene. It was police brutality. It's not race. And
that's correct.
Unfortunately, people have harped on the race issue in order to get their agenda to the finish line. Black Lives Matter and Antifa being 2 of those particular thoughts.
Well, and I would say too, I didn't get to the, because I believe that we've got to take it through the whole process, and I think that then you're justified in having a protest. It might not be an effective protest, but you're justified in having a protest.
Yeah.
But what the problem is external or domestic instigators hijack your protest.
Yep.
And people don't think that that's true, but trust me, as a person who's worked in the intelligence community for the last 10 years, it's true. And it is happening all over the world. I mean, it isn't just in the United States. These for lack of a better word, these socialist, radical anarchists that want to basically tear down civilization, or in their mind restart civilization or equalize civilization is their thing, they say, but they are instigating crisis, and that is something that I think people are misunderstanding, is that a lot of a lot of the people that start to break the windows on the store or throw rocks at the police or are running in there with the fire extinguishers or whatever the case may be to cause chaos and confusion, they are not there to protest police brutality.
Exactly.
They are there to tear down our country. And I do believe a big part of the protest participants are starting to realize that, and they're starting to realize that they're being taken advantage of, and their real true story, the narrative that they're trying to say that police brutality has to stop, is being lost.
Exactly.
And it becomes something else, and it's not what they intended. But the Democrat political leadership benefits from that chaos, and so they're happy to see the violence in a way, because it allows them to justify a more extreme seizure of power. One of the things I said, and I don't know if you saw this speech or not, but I recently did a speech. It was supposed to only be 3 minutes at the Prince William County Board of Supervisors. I made it go for 5 minutes because I wasn't going to have it. But one of the things I said there is I'm like, look, you guys have given these people permission to burn churches, burn police stations, murder cops in the street. And something I said, and people are going to think this is radical, but it's not. If we weren't an armed citizenry, these people would be going door to door.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, so as an armed citizenry, that prevents that from ever happening. Now, let me ask you this then. Well, we need to, if we do away with the cops, what's the response time going to be when somebody kicks in the door? It's going to be never.
Yeah.
So what they wanted, my son is 18. He just turned 18. I swore him in myself to be an infantry airborne ranger, released from basic in August. He's watching the news and he says, so wait, let me get this straight. They want to take away everybody's guns and then they want to disband the police? What is this? What is this? The Purge movie? What are we talking about here?
Thank you.
Crazy.
It's most people would sit back and say, this has got to be a movie. It can't be real life. And I got to ask you, because Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, stated that he is open to conversations with Nancy Pelosi about legislation that would empower the Civil Rights Agency to actually go in and investigate police at the federal level, which would be taking away virtual powers from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or at least sharing those particular powers. They're talking about removing the immunity for police. So literally, a cop could be sued for doing his job. So are we in trouble on the right for not necessarily dealing with the issues of police brutality, but surrendering to a sympathy for race?
Yeah, I think this is one of those situations where people are looking for solutions.
Yep.
Okay, and ultimately, because of the political gridlock, we haven't been able to deal with a lot of these problems because we're doing impeachments and we're doing all this other stuff, but we're not really doing the business of the people.
Exactly.
And so now it's like, oh, well, we have to do something. We have to say something about what's going on, regardless of the fact that it'll never happen. So, I do, like I said, and I'm not one of those people that thinks, I believe 99.999% of the time police are doing the right thing. They are in there doing the right thing. They get a call, it's domestic violence, they separate the two people. If the husband is, drunk or all doped up, or maybe they both are and they're fighting, they're going to do the right thing. They're going to try and apply the law. The problem is really in the prosecution piece.
Yeah.
It's in the stacking of charges, so that if you're going to do all the paperwork, you might as well get something out of it kind of mentality. You know,
Exactly.
it's not in the help community piece, because I think they do that pretty well most of the time. It's in the part where they're having to make an arrest, where they run into a problem. When they're making an arrest, they got to kind of cover their butt. They got to make sure that they get enough charges on somebody to make it worth spending all the time doing the paperwork.
Yeah.
And you know, what would be better is, and this is something that I've talked about for a long time. It just only in this recent conversation is it so poignant. But police have to deal with a lot of mentally ill people.
Yeah.
And they're not trained to deal with mentally ill people. I have a
Thank
coworker. I have a coworker. She's a black girl. She has like a son. He's like, you know, she described him. He's like 6'6". You know, he's a big kid. He's only like 16 years old, and he's autistic. And she's scared to death every time he leaves the home at 16 that he's going to run into a wrong person, or he's going to go to the grocery store or something, and he's going to have like a breakdown. And then the police are going to come because people are like, oh, you know, he's acting crazy or whatever. And they're going to tase the kid because he's autistic.
Yeah.
Because they're not trained to deal with people who have disabilities, or who, you know, they're just not. So, but they're the first responder. It's not going to be the medic that's going to show up. And I would argue that the ambulance technician, he's probably not trained to deal with a mentally ill person either, or a disabled person.
Exactly.
So I think there was a lot of good changes we could make, but we need to make these changes because society needs us to make the change, not because police are racist.
Exactly. And the other thing is that I believe that those changes need to be made at the level of Prince William County. It needs to be made at Manassas and Vienna, Virginia.
Correct.
At the local level, I don't believe Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell need to put their fingers in what happens at the local level. The other thing that you mentioned here, because the state of New York and Los Angeles City are talking about defunding the police and turning those monies over to social services. So literally, social services becomes the police arm for your city, your town, your state, and so on. Are we asking too much of people who are just sworn to keep the oath of protecting and serving? Are we asking for too much?
Yes, I do. I do. I think that they are very, very ill-equipped to deal with a lot of these societal problems. And, you know, they're because their role is law enforcement, you're getting the wrong kind of people to deal with mentally ill people. You're not getting people who care about people who are mentally ill, or kids on the street, or you know, you're getting guys who want to do law enforcement, not social work.
Yeah.
And you know, so I have always theorized that, and it's just like I said, it's just poignant now. You know, I kind of like the idea. And this is very, very we're making all these reactions under pressure right now. We're making all these changes under pressure. We didn't do it in any kind of a deliberate way. We're doing it haphazard because, you know, it's the city is burning, so we gotta come up with a plan to like turn all the police into social workers. Okay, that isn't a good idea. Okay. But what we could do is we could say, look, you know, what is a way that we could increase the sort of the utility of the law enforcement? Do we need special squads that are gonna deal with mentally ill or drug addiction issues, or do we need to build a cadre of law enforcement that can do both? This is America. We can do these things. We just need to do it with some sort of a deliberate plan instead of just like, the city's on fire, we need to change. That isn't
Exactly.
a good way to make changes. And
Tom,
it won't have the effect. It won't have the effect we want.
Thomas Speciale with us tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and run out of time. There's so many other issues to deal with, and we really want to talk with you. We're going to try to get you to come back in a couple of weeks to talk about some of the other issues. But
Okay.
I want to give you the opportunity because I think that is probably the most honest candor I've heard from any candidate who's come on my show regarding this particular issue. It's very honest, it's very sincere. There is a place for change, but to act in a manner out of reactionary situations is
Right.
haphazard. It will lead to defunct and infusion of issues later on, which are problematic. Thomas, how can people support your campaign? How can people get more information about you?
The number one thing you can do is get on my Facebook. I put a lot of stuff out on Facebook. I also have a YouTube channel, and share my stuff. Help me get the word out in Virginia. With the COVID-19 stuff, the campaigning has been very different this year. Our campaign looks really super strong. A lot of the coalitions, I have really strong support, but at the same time, the more people who know, the better. So the best thing you could do is go out on my social media, pull up my videos, look them over, share them with your friends. That's the number one thing you could do. Secondarily, it helps me get the word out if you do donate, because if you donate, all I'm going to use the money for is getting the word out. So it allows me to magnify my voice on social media. Um, but I'm priding myself on the fact that I'm going to show that values can beat millions of dollars every day of the week. So every dollar counts, $5, $10. But the reality is, it's way more valuable if you really learn about me as a candidate, and then you go and you talk to your friends and your family, and you say, hey, you need to look at this guy and ask them to share stuff too, because this is a campaign about values. This is a Holy Spirit campaign too. It's in God's hands. Um,
Amen.
and so, that's the best thing you can do. My website is, like you said, www.thomasspecial.com. That's special with an E on the end.com. And my YouTube is at Speciale for Virginia. And YouTube is just Thomas Speciale.
Thank you so much for coming on tonight. We're going to do our very best to get you back here in a couple of weeks because you've got a lot of national issues to deal with. But unfortunately, the bearing of the brunt of the issues today have dealt with police brutality and the reactions of legislatures to those particular matters.
Ken,
Thank you. Yes, sir.
one final thing. I think, if you look at my four priorities, long before this was a national crisis, I had already identified criminal justice reform as a priority issue for my campaign. I've worked on this campaign for 4 years, and I consider criminal justice reform one of the four most important crisis problems we have in this country. I'm way ahead of the other candidates on that issue, and I want to do something for everybody in America, because I don't think it should be a crime to be poor.
No, no, it shouldn't be a crime to be poor. But I also like the fact that you're not pandering. That's it's a lot of people out here pandering right about now.
I
They're
know.
for everything and everybody and nothing at all. And I thank God for
That's
you
right.
coming on tonight, sir. God bless you.
Thank you, Ken. God
You're
bless you.
welcome. I look forward to you coming back in a couple of weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, Thomas Speciale. Ladies and gentlemen, I am telling you without a shadow of a doubt, you don't need to put another establishment candidate in Washington. You don't need the okey doke that's going on right now between the left and the right. We need to restore America's soul. And that soul begins with God, and it spreads itself out with constitutionalism, capitalism, conservatism, and also individual sovereignty. Any break of those five in our nation and our civilization is gone. We will be right back with more of the best at Urban Conservative Talk, and I'm going to show you a meme, ladies and gentlemen, that has caught on fire. It is viral now on Facebook, and I put that out about an hour and a half ago, believe it or not. We'll be right back.